Hey everyone, welcome to the latest edition of the new podcast, Client Horror Stories. I'm honored to have my new British friend who lives in Victoria, BC, I believe it is, Paul Stephenson, who has a great story that I don't know what this story is. I just know it's great. Let's dive right in. Paul, great to have you here.
Thank you, Morgan. It's great to be on the show. So you and I were talking, and I think this is it's such an interesting topic. The notion that the feeling that you shouldn't really talk about things that go wrong with clients.
Yes.
And in fact, so many experiences are shared. So, my background, just to give it some context, is that, both agency and client side digital marketer for as far back as it goes. I won't tell you just how far, but the beginning, shall we say, of digital. And for the last sort of 5 years, I've been running a consultancy here on the west coast of Canada, working mostly with software companies and helping them with digital marketing, particularly paid advertising, SEO, growth, that sort of thing. So, and prior to that, I had an agency in the UK, a design and marketing agency, which I founded and ran for 13 years before selling it to my team back in 2016, and then emigrating to Canada, which was, something that I wanted to do. So, I have this wealth of experience of being both client side and agency side. And obviously over the course of those many, many years, you see the same themes emerging. And to be honest, the last few years have been really good to me. I've had some great clients with very, very little churn. So, since I've been doing this consultancy for 5 years, I've probably just ended engagements with like one or two clients. I've kept because it's just me, a very small portfolio of clients. And so, I forgot what it was like when you get churn, whether you decide to stop working with a client or they decide to stop working with you. Until recently, that was. And
Ooh, the excitement's about to start.
Well, I just recently had an experience that, it set off the alarm bells, and it reminded me of all of the things that I used to know about client red flags. So whether it's a prospect or a client, that situation that you get into where you're emotionally, your brain is trying to tell you something, but maybe the financial part of your brain isn't listening.
But by the way, Paul, I want to interrupt for a second as we build up the excitement and make an observation that I hadn't thought about before, but you're making a good point, which is as good people and as optimists, we always want things to succeed. So if you stop doing it for a while, you start forgetting all of the red flags and the yellow flags. And because if this happens every day, it's on the top of your mind. But after a while, the optimism comes back a little bit like dating a girl, going terribly, breaking up, and then forgetting why it got so bad. So you get back together again.
No comment on that. So the first thing, so obviously client discretion is a must. The client will remain anonymous.
Yes.
And all of the things I'm going to say, some of them happened with this client, but then it led me to remember previous bad experiences that I had. And so what I actually did is I ended up categorizing the things, the bad things that can happen into 4 groups.
Oh, this is I love that you did your homework.
Yeah, this is organized, isn't it? So
love it. More organized than me.
I will tell a bit more of the story, but I'll just tell you what those categories are now. They're time, So stuff to do with time, stuff to do with scope, project management, and finally attitude. Okay. So, but what I'll do is I'll touch on those as we talk.
As a story progresses.
Yeah.
Love it.
We can explore them in more detail. So, as I say, I mostly deal with ambitious software companies that typically are like under 5 million annual recurring revenue. Quite a lot of them are just really bootstrapped, getting started. So under 1 million in revenue. And I really like working with small, businesses where you're dealing directly with the founder or the CTO, and there's a small team, because you can actually make a big impact on smaller businesses. Whereas, if you're working with big companies, you're a smaller part of what they're doing, whatever element that you do. And in this instance, mostly I'm doing, advertising. But typically with a software business, advertising is probably at the very most going to bring in a third of their business, but more realistically, sort of 10%, is a pretty good standard. So, you're not a priority, and they have other things. They'll be doing content marketing and PR and partnerships and integrations and anything else that they can think of that is going to bring users. And that's right. And it's right to have a mix of stuff. But for the most part, I concentrate on the paid advertising side. I get this referral, which is great, from someone I know, and they're referring me to somebody they know who is the founder of a new software business. It's less than 12 months old, and they fit my profile that I like to work with. So no alarm bells there at all. Okay, we start talking. And as is sometimes the case, there's a time difference because of our locations. Right. And that in itself, I think, should never raise a flag. If you want the business, then, you have to talk to somebody at midnight or whenever, so be it. So that isn't the issue. But I think, what is an issue is when you talk to someone and the first time you talk to them, they're in a hurry.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And this is contradictory to some of the other things that they might say later. But, the fact is, and this happens a lot in tech, they tell you that they're a small business. They tell you they're a small team. They tell you that all of their team are remote. But they have these big ambitions. And typically, the thing that I hear quite a lot of, maybe it's just me, is that they want to get to 7 figures within the first 12 months of the business. So they want to turn over $1 million within the first 12 months. Okay. So right there, when you hear that, an alarm bell should ring, because what they're basically doing is saying that they have very, very high expectations, which great. We all have in life. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to grow up and become Spider-Man, an astronaut, or a millionaire. And I haven't achieved any of those things yet, but I had high hopes, right? So they get on the call, and practically the first thing they say is, hey, we're going to be a 7-figure turnover business within 12 months. And you're going to help us do it. You go, okay. So, what's your plan? And they go, and we're in a hurry. So, you spell out your process, and they, basically don't want to spend too much time on the discovery part where you're learning about their business, because they want to get on, because they want leads and they want customers, and it's like chop, get going. So, so the first conversation was a little bit like that, and I start thinking.
So let's dive into that for a minute. I think it's a really interesting and a great point. So them being a hurry implies the broader version of that is unrealistic expectations. And the second point that being in a hurry implies is they're not that experienced at this, because anyone who's been around the rodeo a couple of times knows that there's like ups and downs and learnings, and it's hard. So this combination, this combination of unrealistic expectations combined with not having done it enough to know how it goes already is like two yellow flags coming together. So the flags are starting to look red.
Yeah, indeed. And so, when I get off the call, and I'll tell you more about the call, but when I get off the call, my partner, Lisa, asks, "Oh, how did the call go?" And I said, "I have a bad feeling about this, the Han Solo immortal words. And the lesson that I should have learned, but because, I'm out of touch with dealing with sort of bad feelings, is go with your bad feelings. If you have a bad feeling, it's not going to get any better."
By the way, this advice is so easily forgotten. Like, your gut knows more than your brain.
It absolutely does. So, during the course of the conversation, this first meeting, it's peppered with other time related factors like, we should do this, or you should do this, and that shouldn't take long. Okay, which is okay. So
by the way, that phrase, I hate it, and I make a point with everyone I manage to never say that.
I never say it. I never say it to anybody. If I'm using a contractor or a supplier's working for me, I know we all want to say it. We all think it, but I never, ever say it, because I've been on the wrong side of it so many times. And
I want to point out, a lot of people don't realize that it's little phrases like this that really set people off. So
yeah, it is. It's like tiny piranha fish nibbling away at you.
By the way, we should create a blog post that's like phrases to never use with a client.
Oh, I think we could do a book. We could spin this off as a movie. There's so many opportunities for this.
Maybe this is how you'll make the $1 million.
I'm honestly not looking to make $1 million, but I know a lot of clients who are.
In 12 months.
Always in 12 months.
Always.
So they're in a hurry. They want to make $1 million. This shouldn't take long. And they would do it themselves, but they're way too busy.
Oh, that's another one. Oh, we have 2 items for our list now.
And so we get over the first call, and we decide we want to go ahead. So we set up this second call, and pretty much along the lines of getting an email saying, I can't really schedule any time with you this week. This is from them because they're too busy, but I can talk to you right now. Right now, 8 or 9 p.m. in the evening. Call me now. So, this is like, there's a lot of give and take in collaboration and compromises, but sort of because you're the client, you feel that you have to dictate that everything moves at your pace, irrespective of what the scope is or your expertise is, and everything has to fit around you. I think is a terrible mistake for clients, and I've been a client to plenty of people myself, to make. What you're doing when you hire someone is you're hiring their expertise, and I'm not saying that everything should fit perfectly around them and you should fit into their processes and you should be a dream client to them. But certainly, if you make fitting in with you a higher priority, I think you get a lower quality of work. Because if you make people jump through fiery hoops, they're not going to put their best efforts into everything else that they do for you.
Yes. So all this is great. A few other points to add to that. Communication in your first days, weeks, not just working together, even negotiating, sets the stage and the tone for everything else. So saying this on like right after the first call sets off the flags in your mind. Also, I feel like an underrated part of treating a professional is professionals control their own time. Correct. So, and like that's at the heart of it. Like you have a task, the professional gives you expertise and advice and helps you do it, but he's not the technician. Like the technician is the guy that says, okay, you need 4 hours, sit here 4 hours and fix my plumbing. That's different. That's different than the so already not respecting your time is the yellow flag's getting darker.
Indeed, yeah. And on that point, if you create, as I do, boundaries with clients. So what I say to my clients is, I'll tell them how long I'm working on their account each week. And that's reflected in, the cost to some degree and the value that they get. But, what I've learned from that is I don't tell people which day I'm working on their stuff now. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is managing expectations, because sometimes you have to juggle your schedule or whatever. And if, as I have done in the past, told clients, I work on your stuff on Thursdays, then, that can be great for them if they're organized around that cadence. And I've got one long-established client who knows that I work with them on a Wednesday. And that works because, we're in synchronicity around that. But they're a good client. With this particular example, I set out what my boundaries were in terms of how much work I would be doing, and even the day that I would be doing it on, which I thought was, a good thing because they could get organized, manage expectations. And, as we got into the engagement, the way that they used that was to actually use that as a brick to pound my head the rest of the week, saying that basically, because it wasn't the day, how could they expect it to go 7 days without contacting me? And I said, you can contact me. You can contact me the rest of the week. It's just that, you won't get an instant reply. And so the thing that I conveyed at the start of the engagement was the way that I worked, my parameters, my boundaries. And then they decided, as soon as we got into the engagement, that actually they didn't like it that way, because what they wanted, and I think, this, I've come across this before, but I think it's particularly with tech companies, is that they want you on the hook all the time. So, they want you in their Slack or in their project management software. And so, if somebody asks a question or whatever, they want an instant response. Now, I work async. I can't be, with multiple clients, I can't be responding and in everybody's Slack channel and responding all of the time. But then, we had this situation coming back to time again. Not only would they, try and contact me anytime, night or day, and expect an instant response over multiple channels, and I'm one man, and they know that I'm one man. Yeah. But they would sit on decisions. So I would, By
the way,
so it's like hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. Exactly. So, you'd be, there'd be something that I needed just to finish off, a particular ad campaign setup. And they would sit on it for a week. And then, I'd chase them the following week. I maybe even chase them, a few days in between. And you just hear nothing. And then like 10 days later, you get the thing like, oh, we don't want to do that this way now. We want to look at something completely different. Or, and it's just like they'd already agreed the scope, the campaign was going to go a certain way, the creative's been done, we're waiting on, a testimonial approval or something being approved. And they just like, we need this live tomorrow. And we're like, yeah, we're waiting on you to approve it for the last 7 days. So, there's lots of issues around time, but I think those should be very familiar to anybody who's ever done any contracting or freelancing. Why is everything taking so long? Well, we're waiting for decisions from you. So pretty much, within the first couple of meetings, all of the time red flags that you could possibly have were triggered just with one client. And, that's probably a new record. Then
question,
yeah.
As these were getting triggered, did you push back or address it directly with him or? Yes.
So I addressed it, within Zoom calls and in email, and some fairly blunt emails. When you signed up for this, we agreed this, and this, and you're now moving the goalposts, which leads me on to the next category of red flags, really, which is scope creep.
Cool.
So I think there's 3 classic scope creeps that this client was able to demonstrate within, I was working with them for 3 or 4 months. And that's really short for me. Most of my clients, I had clients in the UK that I worked with for 13 years. I have clients here that I've had for 3.5 years, out for the 5 years. Personally, I see anything less than a year engagement with a client as being, something didn't fit, something didn't work. And so, I take that very personally because my whole business life has been built on long-term relationships. And I think that's where, you create value for both sides. I don't think short-term relationships, one-night stands really work out in anyone's interests. So I think that the 3 scope issues that you would commonly see and that they demonstrated was, the first one is, as I say, you agree a project scope, you agree the fees, you agree how you're going to work, and then almost immediately they move the goalposts, and so suddenly, you're no longer building a shed, you're building a mansion. Or the equivalent in digital marketing terms. So, scope creeping is a very classic thing that clients sometimes do intentionally. A lot of the time it's unintentional because I honestly believe that they don't understand the difference in the workload that they're giving you. And it often leads to the very next phrase, which is, can you just ...
Can you? Love it. I've heard that so much.
Yeah. And, I think you have to bite your tongue when you hear that phrase because, I think your job then is to educate them why you can't just ... why you can't just do that thing. Sometimes you have to swallow it if it's going to, be something that is relatively easy to do. You have to take a little bit of a flyer on it. But when you have a succession of can you justs, I think you then have to worry.
I love it. The way I would make that point is there's this ancient Greek paradox that's known as the Swordi's paradox, which is, it was originally with dust, but it's easier to think about with hair. If someone has a head full of hair, if you remove 1 strand, are they bald? No. 2 strands? No. 3 strands? No. How many strands of hair do you need to remove because you become bald? And what's powerful about that paradox is to use Engels' phrasing of it, although I hate Marx and Engels, but it's but it's an insightful way of saying it. Changes of quantity lead to changes of type. And in other words, one more, just this 5 minutes here, just this 5 minutes here, just this 5 minutes there. Even if each one is just 5 minutes, just one strand of hair, enough of those just 5 minutes, and the hairy man is bald.
Yeah. So a couple of other ways of putting that is that, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Or do you remember, you're probably a similar age to me, but do you remember as a kid growing up and there was a plastic sort of buckaroo? It was like a plastic donkey, and you used to load it up with little mining things like a pan and a pickaxe and whatever. It's like a little plastic donkey. And then when it got too heavy, it would spring up and all of the pieces would fly everywhere. So that was called, you definitely had it in the States and everywhere around the world. It was by MB Games and it's called Buckaroo.
I don't remember
Google
that.
Buckaroo. So, projects can be a bit like Buckaroo.
I love it.
Yeah, you load, if, there's so much on it already, but if you overload the project, the whole thing can turn to shit.
Love it.
There you go. I just got you your explicit labeling for your podcast.
I'm so new to podcasting, I didn't even realize there was an explicit labeling. And in some previous ones, people use worse language. But love it. Okay. I don't mind. The vulgar language makes the point emotional and strong. So be as dirty as you want.
Yeah. So, going back to this story, I mean, really, the whole scope thing, they move the goalposts on you.
So what's an example of how this client moved the goalpost?
So, we started off by talking about particular channels that we were going to market in, and they agreed on channels based on the research that I'd done, my experience and expertise. And then they came along and said, hey, we want to try this other channel instead. So, for example, I might have recommended we're going to use Google search, LinkedIn, and Twitter, say, and they say, hey, we want to try Facebook and Instagram, or we think that this would sell really well on TikTok. And, that's fine. I mean, that happens a lot, but it's when people push it and they say, well, hang on, we defined the scope of this. And, we talked about the pros and cons of the different channels. I did the research. I showed you the research, but now you've decided that you want to go off and do this other thing, this other channel. That's not in the mix. We can do that, but you're going to need more budget and you're going to need some more of my time. Oh, no, we don't want to do that. We'll swap it out for one of the other things that you've already been working on.
So
and
typical.
Put a lot of time into. So, so that can be, very frustrating and problematic, but it helps a lot.
There's a broader version of that is a lot of clients don't realize that everything's a trade-off. Yeah. So they just give you more and think, it's just 5 minutes, but everything comes at a cost. And that cost is time, money. Maybe it's none of them, but if you don't get time or money, then it just increases the chance of a breakdown at some point.
Yeah. So there was some definitely issues there around scope, which, and I thought after, 25 plus years in this game, should we call it, that I was pretty good at defining scope and managing scope creep. But I think you can get complacent with it, and sometimes it will come back and bite you in the arse.
This is similar to the earlier point about a lot of these risks happening because we're optimists and want things to turn out well. So it's like, you're optimistic and you like him. You're like, I'll just do this for 5 more minutes. No one wants to be the asshole who says, no, I won't spend 2 more minutes on the account. No one wants to be that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing was one of the pushbacks that I did do at one point is, when they rescoped part of the project is I said, okay, do you remember the first conversation we had where you said that you admitted that you had complete ignorance of digital advertising, and that you would rely on my expertise. And it seems now that you suddenly have some really strong opinions on what we should do. So what's changed? And, I pushed a little bit. Anyway, I found out what changed.
What changed?
Okay, so what had changed is they had spoken to a friend of a friend or a friend who, was also an entrepreneur in business, selling something completely different. So they're in software. This guy sells, I'm not going to tell you what he sells, but a product, a business to consumer product. They're selling business to business software. He's selling business to consumer product. Okay. And they told me, I can't remember what the exact words were. It was either that he's killing it or crushing it on Facebook and Instagram, selling this product. So I'm saying, so what you're telling me is, someone who is killing / crushing it on Facebook and Instagram with a completely different product or service aimed at a completely different consumer. And that's right. That's why we want to do it.
I don't know if I want to laugh or cry because I've heard variations of that so many times as well. And it's incredible to me also how often people who are otherwise smart and rational, as soon as a friend's friend is crushing it, suddenly like N equals 1, like this one guy is doing it. So we have to be, so it has to work for us as well.
Yeah. And so on top of that, what they said was, if you don't think that this channel, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, is going to be good for us, then we're going to use his guy to do it because he's way cheaper than you.
Wow. So when people say things like that, like that is explicitly a threat. But I always wonder if they realize it's a threat or not. Like is he saying this? I don't know. Some people. So how did you respond to that?
I was like flabbergasted. I find that sort of thing really annoying. I tell you what, back in the, I was building websites from about 1995 onwards. And the thing that I heard a lot through the late 90s and early 2000s was, with my agency was, we've got a friend or a cousin who can do that cheaper. And it just became a running joke in our studio. We were just like, oh yeah, somebody's cousin could do this better than us. Somebody's cousin's cheaper than us. We're rubbish at this. We've been doing it for years and we still don't know what we're doing. There's always somebody better and cheaper. And so my natural inclination is to say, yeah, go on then, go ahead. Fill your boots.
And did you say that?
So I did. I said that to them face to face on a Zoom call that ended the engagement because, I think it not been the first time that they said that I was expensive, but they hired me knowing exactly what I was going to cost and, what the scope was and what the value was that I was proposing to offer them. And then throughout, the 3-4 month engagement, they just harangued me almost weekly with how expensive I was. And I'm just like, yeah, I never told you that, I told you exactly how much it was going to cost. Exactly. I mapped out a 3-month plan of all the activity that I was doing for them and delivered on it all. And yet they kind of use this as a bat to beat me with, the fact that, they thought I was expensive. Well, cost and value are relative, really. I mean, clearly there was an issue there in that they didn't think, I'll be honest, that they obviously didn't think I was delivering the value that they were expecting. But, some of that was on them because, when you set up, say, retargeting campaigns or ad campaigns, there's a lot of setup and there's a lot of collaboration needed. And, I started with another client at the same time, brought on a new client at exactly the same time as them. And I did the setup and everything was launched, campaigns and everything within 2 weeks. It took 5 or 6 weeks with them. And that was just because there were so many issues on their side. The communication was poor. They wouldn't get back to me. When they did get back to me, it was like, we don't know what your problem is. There was this kind of arrogance about everything.
So this is interesting. I want to make a couple comments on that. First, what I hadn't realized until this now, so it's a new observation for me, is how often it is that bad behavior is linked to other bad behavior. Like you rarely see the great client, but he's doing this one painful, terrible thing. Instead, it's almost always the case that these guys are acting terribly in this way and this way and this way and this way, even though on the surface it's like time and scope and all these different things that you would think aren't related to each other. So there's clearly some underlying something that is that is causing so much bad behavior. When this is useful to know, because what this means, if you see one yellow flag, you're likely to see more yellow flags, and so even one yellow flag should start getting you to pay attention.
Well, this is a little bit out of chronological order, but I think you're gonna like this a lot. The big red flag that I missed at the very start is when they told me that they had problems with finding and retaining other contractors.
Ooh, that's yeah.
Okay, and they sort of brushed it off a little bit, and then as it got further into the conversation, the CEO actually said that hiring marketers had given them PTSD. And so what they wanted to do was find a marketer who didn't suck. Okay. So what that did is, and I completely fell for it, and I shouldn't have. It makes you feel like you should work really hard and try your best for this client, because that's what you do, isn't it? It's like being back at school. You sit up straight and you do your best handwriting. But what I should have done is I should have said, well, if you've had a lot of problems with contractors, that's on you. There's clearly, you are the only common denominator in that. And, not every marketer can give you, surely, PTSD. You must have worked with some good people. But, here I am now. I'm another ex-marketer to add to their portfolio. And I'm sure that they would tell people that I gave them PTSD as well. That's very powerful language. And when they said it, I just laughed. I just thought it was funny. They were being dramatic, but they weren't being dramatic. And I only found that out in subsequent calls. They didn't tell me ever what these people had done wrong, how they'd managed to give them PTSD, but they just kept repeating the phrase like it was some sort of mantra that, all marketers suck. They give us PTSD. We can't find anyone that is a great fit for us, and so it's the very small things, I think, in those first meetings that really matter. And rather than laughing them off, I should have actually drilled in and dug in and said, what do you mean they gave you PTSD? How did they give you PTSD? And I still to this day don't know what it was. And I think what it actually translates to mean, subsequently, I think I have an explanation for it, is they don't understand how marketing works. They don't understand how to do marketing. They find it really frustrating. And so then they find even very clear communication with a an experienced marketer frustrating because they don't really understand how to work with marketers. So
I agree with all of that. That makes sense. A couple of thoughts on that. Yeah, it's if you have a bad experience one time, it's bad luck. But when it happens a bunch of times, like you're doing something wrong, and I think it would make normal people or less crazy people become introspective. Wow, what am I doing wrong? It also feels like it's an ego reflection. Like when your ego is too high, of course it can't be me. It just has to be that this industry attracts terrible people. But it's also become a part of my standard questions that I use in when I'm considering working with someone, to ask them all about their previous, the previous marketer that they worked with. So I think that's like a good question to just like put on the list of things to find out up front, because by drilling in, how come they left? It always gets insights, and sometimes it's red flags like this, like they have on those expectations, but also it's just oh, these things went wrong, even though it's not major. So you should know, okay, they really care about XYZ that you usually don't pay that much attention to. So you can prioritize that for them.
Yeah, exactly. I think as the engagement went on, there were, or we first started working together, I think there was a couple of other things that came up, which I'd put in the sort of project management category, if you like.
This is a good segue to jump into that category.
Yeah, because, as you start working with them, you have the initial red flags, and then other things come up. And there's two really common things that I want to talk about for freelancers and contractors. And the problem is these things seem benign when you first talk about them. I touched on one of them earlier. The first one is joining their company Slack channel, or their Slack. Okay.
Let's talk about this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So it seems benign, doesn't it? That you feel quite welcome. You think, oh wow, they trust me.
I'm like a team member.
Yeah, they want me in their Slack, and you can see their Slack is filled out with lots of other contractors and other people. But it's really for their benefit. It's not for your benefit. And if you're a solo contractor or freelance or even a small agency, managing multiple relationships in company Slack channels is not scalable. And in fact, what it's going to do is it's going to destroy your productivity, because what it means is that not only is that one contact, maybe it was the CEO or the CMO, exposed to you, but the whole of their team's exposed to you. So, somebody in their engineering team can say, "Hey, about the Google Tag Manager, we've been looking into it," or "Hey, we can't get this to work," and so what happens is the amount of things that you're doing balloon. It's much more likely to go off scope because there are so many more people involved. And one of the things that you have to think about when you take on a project is how many points of contact are there going to be? Because if you're dealing with just a, bootstrapped one man or one woman, software company, that's great. The total amount of contact is going to be one-on-one. Okay. But
yes.
But the more people involved, the more time consuming it's going to be. And if you ever get involved in, Zoom meetings where there's like 6, 7, 8 people and decisions are being made and you're there as an advisor or a contractor, those things can suck a lot of time. And if you've agreed like a set scope and a set cost for things, then Slack is definitely one way to, blow your budget completely.
It's interesting. I agree with that. This is one where I fall prey to because I love Slack. So I consciously make that bad decision, and it's hard for me to resist. And I think so a couple of things. All the time with clients, they hire you, but then they want things that are actually not in their interest. Like they want you to go to all these meetings. And on one level, intellectually, they realize, oh yeah, if you spend so much time in these meetings, it will like eat away at the clock and you'll have less time for the more important stuff. But like that it almost never connects consciously. So because they keep on asking you to go to these time wasting meetings anyway.
Yeah.
So it becomes doubly important to push back. Hey, it's not in your interest that I spend this hour in the meeting. Like I'm not going to have any value to contribute to it. You can send me a 3-sentence summary afterwards, and it's better for you that I spend an hour, focusing on your goals.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think in a similar vein to that is project management software. So, I use project management software. I'm sure a lot of people use project management software when you're juggling projects. I love Asana. Okay, so you're an Asana man. Okay.
I'm an Asana man.
So it depends what I'm doing, but it'll be like Trello or Teamwork, or I use Harvest a lot. So yes. Horses for courses, really. Different project management software is appropriate for different things and to different businesses. But again, one of the things that happened with this client is they said, so I said, I shared a Trello board with them, and I said, here's the project for the next 3 months. Here's the stages, here's the months, here's the breakdown, here's what we're doing. They said, great. Can you put all of that into our Monday project management software? And I said, well, it's there already in Trello. And they said, no, but we want the whole of our team to see it. I said, well, as far as I know, there's just the 3 of us working on this project. But okay. So then, I log into their Monday, not used Monday before. It's different. You can't do the same things. So you spend an hour or 2 resetting up all of your project in their project management software, so that other people who it doesn't really matter. It's just so that they can have everything in one place. But then all you're doing is, all they're doing is looking at the progress that you're making and the status. They're not actually interacting that much with it. They could have it could be view only for all it matters, but they want it on their system because it's theirs and they want to control it. I think the problem with that is that, as an agency or a contractor or whatever, you have your own processes, you have your own integrations, you have your own project management software, hopefully. But even if you don't, even if you've got a notepad or you do it all in Google Sheets, at least you're doing it your way, okay? And then making you change the way you do things to do it their way, but still expect, the same results is, you're not familiar with that project management software. It's actually not hugely beneficial.
I hadn't thought about this point before, but I like it. You're bringing up a bunch of new insightful points today. It's awesome. One of my favorites so far. The way I would frame it, or the way I'd interpret what you're saying, because I agree with it, is by making someone else change the process that they know works, creates cognitive resistance in your mind, and the cognitive resistance in your mind makes it intellectually much harder to solve the problems and focus on the tasks at hand. Here, absolutely. An example of that, a non-work example I would give of that is I speak Spanish awesomely, and I can understand 90%, say 95% of what I want to say. But the problem I have in Spanish is whenever I'm speaking understanding in Spanish, all my brain power goes towards translating what they're saying. I'm left with unable to process to come up with smart, intelligent, clever things to say. So I end up saying generic, stupid, simple things. And I feel like I never realized this metaphor until right now, but I feel it's the same sort of thing. When I'm really trying to figure out Monday and how it goes and it just takes up so much time, mental energy that it just becomes cognitively harder to focus on, okay, I need to figure out your PPC problems and solve them.
Yeah, it's cognitive load, right? So
it's called, wait, what's the word?
Cognitive load.
Yeah, that's right. Cognitive load. That's the right phrase. Cognitive load.
It's a great name for a band. So the final sort of category. So we've sort of talked about time, scope, project management. The final one is probably the most important, and it's attitude, in my opinion. Both their attitude and yours. And I think, I am guilty of doing one thing wrong, really wrong with that client. Well, probably two things wrong. I have a terrible tendency to be very honest with people, and not everybody likes that. That is an attitudinal mistake that I make. I don't know whether it's my background, upbringing, or whatever, but I'm just not interested in lying. I just would rather, or even sort of being all slippery about the truth. I just rather just tell them exactly what it is.
You don't sugarcoat.
Yeah, I don't sugarcoat. And now culturally, that is difficult, I think, with some cultures, definitely. I think you Americans, you're brilliant at that.
I mean, what I would point out is within the US, there's a very clear, and I'm from New York, very clear New York culture of no sugarcoating. Yeah. And once you leave New York, basically from New York,
it gets sweeter.
The more out west you go, the more and more sugar until you hit California, where it's like you get diabetes just by crossing the border.
Yeah, so I'm on the west coast of Canada, and really this is the California of the North. It is the same. And I think it's true. I've met and worked with quite a few people in Toronto and find them to be a lot more matter of fact, a lot more like New Yorkers. But out west here, it's, everything is just awesome, even if it's terrible.
By the way, one trick I often use, because I like you try to be blunt, and I invest too much cognitive energy in trying to figure out how can I do that without them hating me, because you want to be strong. Because if you sugarcoat it, they don't understand the point. So the challenge is, how do you get the point across without being the asshole? And I'll tell you some tricks that I use. One trick I use is I really play up my New Yorkness. That I'm like, hey, I'm from New York. I'm going to be blunt, and I tell it to them on day one, so they go in with that expectation. A second thing that I do is, often in conversations with them, I ask them, who do you want me to be in this conversation? And I say, like, do you want me to be the nice guy? Do you want me to be the blunt asshole? Do you want me to be this? And by saying that, it's like, and I've had people say to me, like, I've had people ask me to sugarcoat my response when I ask them that, because sometimes people know they're messing up and they want to hear it, but their little hearts can't handle it.
Yeah. I think it is the subtle part to business, and it doesn't suit everyone. So I'm definitely guilty of that. There was a couple of other things that came up in this engagement.
Let's talk about the attitude. Tell me about other aspects of your attitude in this, because I'm interested in diving into this one.
Right, my attitude. Well, I do pride myself on being horrifically honest, and I'll actually, as you do, I'll tell people from the start, but I don't. Unlike you, I'm really not very good at changing mode, and I don't think it's ever really got in the way of business. I think a lot of my business is actually won on the back of that, because quite often what happens, I had it the other day with a client I just took on. They said that they spoke to a lot of people. By a lot, I think they meant like 4 or 5, and before speaking to me, and they told me some of the things other people said that they could do with this particular project, that this particular thing that we were talking about. And I told them it wasn't possible, or they would, it'd just be a waste of money. And they said, well, we were really surprised. Nobody had told us that we'd waste our money doing it that way. And nobody suggested anything else. And so we'd like to use you. And it's because this, and honestly, I've made a career out of it. I've talked people out of just as much work as I've talked people into it. In fact, I've never talked anybody into doing any work with me. But I've definitely talked a lot out of doing it. And I think in the long run, that's a much better place to be in. I do hear it's definitely more prevalent over here than in the UK that, agencies and contractors and freelancers tend to overpromise a lot, that everything is going to be awesome and amazing, and very, very positive, upbeat story. Whereas my story tends to be more, I don't know if this will work. We're going to do some research. We're going to run some experiments that are going to be low cost. And then we're going to reach some conclusions and iterate from there. Whereas I think a lot of people are like, yeah, this would be awesome. Spend all your money with us. We'll deliver this amazing result. And then they fall flat on their asses. Now, maybe that's just a different attitude. And sometimes they come good. Sometimes they pull miracles out of the...
So I have a question on attitude. Something I try to do and follow in my practice is I only work on projects that I'm excited about. And the moment I realize I'm no longer excited about a project is the moment when I realize, okay, I have to step down. Sometimes there's like a couple week difference because you question yourself, but always within a couple of weeks.
So what is it? What is it, if I can just turn the tables? So what is it that would make you change your mind about a project?
Oh, but that goes to the question I was going to ask you about this one. So I would assume or presume that you only take a project if on day one you're optimistic. And so on day one, you saw the yellow flags, but you thought they were light yellow. So on day one, you saw light yellow flags. You were optimistic, but at some point between that and that point 4 months later, when you had that big conversation and you stepped down, at some point you had to have realized it's just not going to work out with them. And so sometimes it's the client's bad behavior where like too many issues compound and you have to do that. That's what happens sometimes. But like it would also be misleading to say that's the only reason why it happens. Sometimes I've taken on projects where less recently, but more long ago, whereas I bit off more than I could chew. And it's not even necessarily that it was too much work for me, but sometimes you have to be at the right moment in your life. Oh, this other big thing is about to happen in my life that's going to distract me. And this is actually going to be a ton of work. Yeah, I can make it work. And then sometimes after 3 months, you're like, dude, I thought I'd be able to juggle 8 balls at the same time, but I can only juggle 4 balls. So I have to find out how to put 4 balls gently on the ground without them.
You have to choose your balls.
Totally. So, so sometimes it's their fault. Sometimes it's my fault. And in real life, it's often a combination of those of those two. Like things are never so clean and neat that it's 100% my fault or 100% their fault.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I made a lot of mistakes in this engagement with this client, but I think it was because, I hadn't seen a lot of these red flags for a long time. That nothing was new to me. It was all like, oh, here we go. And I sort of left them off as I crashed through the barriers. I laughed like an insane man, thinking, oh, I'd seen this before. And then, the barriers just build and build and build until you can't actually move forward. So, I think there's one final thing on attitude that I'd like to talk about, which is really important for me. And this engagement made me realize, and it's a big red flag. And that is, if they don't have any humor or humility.
Interesting.
So if you can laugh and joke around with people, and you can come to an understanding, can't you? But if and I admit that my humor isn't always in line with other people's. There's like cultural gaps and stuff. But it's a fundamental thing, that the ability to sort of, like people. Now, they were likable people. It wasn't that I didn't like them.
Right.
And it's a really nice business. And I think they will be successful. I don't think they'll probably turn over 7 figures in 12 months, but even if they do, I think the two things that they weren't able to laugh at themselves or just see the funny side to anything, and not that there was anything to see the funny side about. And like the whole humility thing, staying humble, like rather than sort of saying, there's a problem here. Oh, I wonder what that problem can be. Let's have a chat about the problem. Be like, yeah, you've got a problem. It's definitely on your side. Our technical setup is perfect. And then you go in, and I'd have to prove, that technically their setup was poor and it was not working and it was broken. And then, I had to do that multiple times. And when it got to the third time, I just thought, no, this arrogance is just, I don't have a problem with people being ambitious. I love that. I really want people to be ambitious for their businesses. I like getting and feeling ambitious for somebody else's business and feeling that I can help them reach their goals. But, the kind of arrogance that you sometimes get, I really, really struggle with, almost to the point now where I'm thinking, do I want to carry on working with software companies? Because a lot of them are actually quite arrogant.
So, great points. I had never thought so clearly about the importance of humor and humility, but I love it. I'm gonna start using it. By the way, a bunch of my books have been published, and one is a humor book, and actually 2, and another is actually a book on humility. So,
you're an expert.
So I actually have published like best-selling book, the largest publishing house in the world. Like but I never thought so clearly that the importance of humor and humility, and actually the subjects of like my 2 favorite books of my own. so I'm totally going to steal that phrase. Are you
going to put them on the video? And so here's the link to them. Buy
it. Probably not. But the other point I want to make is the humility one is interesting. Like, I agree 100%. It's important. The challenge is working with any CEO or founder. The founder and CEO personalities, by definition, those jobs are going to attract people who have the exact opposite of humility. Like, you have to be arrogant to think that I can change the world in this little way, even if it's just I want to convince people to spend $1 million on my shit, not on other people's shit. You need arrogance in order to think that. So as a result, founder CEO who's also humble, it's not quite as uncommon as a unicorn, but it's approaching that level. So
I'd never thought about it like that, Morgan. That is really, I think that, do you know what I think the difference is? That I spent probably the first 20, 25 years of my career working with small business owners predominantly. And they tend not to be so arrogant and tend to be more humble and
Correct.
admit. But then when you get to VC-backed software companies or even bootstrapped.
By the way, this is very consistent with my experience. I know so many small businesses, and some guy that has 30 employees, and guess what? He's making millions of dollars. It's a real business that real businesses that some guy started. He loves his thing. He did well. So now he just runs a network of 6 gyms, and he's a great guy and he does well. That's it's because that emerged naturally out of his passion for gyms. It's much easier to be that archetype of someone without arrogance, as opposed to the biggest VC firm in the world just gave me $3 million. That happens. You're going to have in almost all cases, almost the unicorn in ego. It goes all the way up there.
That is fascinating. Do you know what? I'd never made that connection.
Both of us are making new connections tonight. This has been fun. So now to wrap up any more, because I feel like your story is great. We also jumped around a bit, so it was awesome.
We did.
And any other, so you mentioned a little while ago, the final conversation where you had that end of the engagement. Any other to wrap it up? After that, any other problems? Did you hear from them? Have they fired a few more marketers since you left?
That's a really good point. So I think I made a really big mistake in that, and I have done this before in business. I took all of their criticism personally. And that is a fatal mistake to make in business. And so when we had the final conversation, it wasn't heated, but, I laid down the way that I saw it. There was no way in my mind that we were going to come out of that conversation and continue to work together, because I had crashed through so many barriers, things that probably didn't even register to them, sending me emails and including stuff like, we can get somebody else to do this for less, or you're really expensive, or, when you've read that once or twice, you just begin to think, well, we're probably not made to work together. Yeah. So, I deliberately had the call with the intent of ending the engagement, and I wish them luck, and I still wish them luck. I'm sure it will be successful. I think we both parties learned something from the engagement. It reminded me of what client red flags are and how many there are, because I'd forgot. It's been I've had it quite easy for the last few years, just working with a handful of clients, and I think for their part, I think there was a lot to learn in terms of, mostly attitude, really, of how you partner with people and how you deal with them and how you treat them. In some ways, you need to actually treat them as well as or better than your employees. I think that they will be successful, but I don't regret stop working with them. And, there's strange things happen when you make the decision to stop working with someone. You'll find that as that door closes, another one opens. And, all you're doing is, I don't like the idea of, I've never liked the idea of being a sausage factory, somebody who's just churning out work. And I'm not that interested in that. I only work with a handful of clients, but inevitably where you do have churn, that does free you up for other things, and other opportunities will come along, and it won't be the end of your life. So, if you get that, if you go to bed at night and you get that heavy feeling in your chest, and you think it's a client that's giving that to you rather than indigestion from something, the best thing is to let them go. because, you'll feel better, they'll feel better. And do you know what? Other opportunities will come along, which will be better for you. How positive is that?
I love it. I agree with that 1,000%. What I would add on a slightly less optimistic note is, unfortunately, I found that wisdom that you just shared, which is fantastic, often comes with age. Like when you're 23 and that $5,000 a month is life-changing to you at 23, it's much harder to turn down a few $1,000s a month than a few decades later, when that money comes and money goes.
Money does come and money does go. And, the other thing to say on that is that if you ever do a really good price for someone, or you do something at less than you think you should be doing it, it will always be painful. So always charge more than you think, because, when it gets painful, the money is not much of a solace, but at least the bills get paid. That
makes sense. A piece of advice that I think of people when they're struggling with, how do I make more money, or I'm unhappy, or these annoying clients, I often recommend people just list all of your clients by how much money you're making from them and how much you enjoy working with them, like 1 to 10 for each, and multiply the two together. And then on the resulting column, just take the bottom 20% and get rid of them. And what I find useful about this process is because, hey, you're willing to put up with more bad behavior if the money is worth it. It's just human nature. But when it has that combination of both terrible money and terrible client relationships, then it becomes doubly important in order to clear it from your emotions and your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. That was great.
Yeah, and thank you. This was fun. I almost want to do it again. I hope you have more terrible clients, so we have an excuse to do this again.
I hope not. I've learned from my own lessons.
I hope you learned from lessons. This was fun. Thank you for coming, and to be continued. And everyone who made it to the end, I hope it was worth it. Thank you for watching.
Bye.